This is an experience I had several years back in either 2015 or 2016. At the time, I was working as a second shift mechanic at a trucking company, 30 miles from where I lived. I became good friends with one of the mechanics on my shift, and we would often hang out after the shift ended. We both lived in the same town and would usually grab a case of beer on the way home since gas stations were still open close to midnight. There was a spot in the woods behind my house that I had turned into a fire pit, and on most occasions he would follow me home so we could drink there and not have to worry about bothering anybody in the late hour. One night, after we punched off the time clock, we agreed to hang out like any other night. But this time, he couldn't follow me home. I don't remember the reason since it was a long time ago. But instead, he could meet me at the church up the road from my house. I purchased the beer, get to the church parking lot, and wait for him to arrive. Now, some time passes and he is nowhere to be seen, so I figured I would get out of my car and watch the road, looking for headlights. I finally see his truck pull into the lot, and he pulls up beside my car, which I am leaning against. We decide to hang out at the church for a bit before we depart to my place, both of us leaning against our vehicles, facing the headstones. Now here's where things get weird. We were talking and he cuts me off mid-sentence and says, "Do you see that?" "See what?" I said. He said he saw a movement and points to a headstone several rows up from the curb of the parking lot. I focused in that direction for a moment, but honestly couldn't see whatever he had saw. He seemed very taken back by it, and I could tell he wasn't joking by his expression. I asked him what exactly it was he had seen, in which he replied, "A dark shadow rocking back and forth." Whether I believed him fully, or not hearing his description gave me cold chills. I asked if he had a means of defense, and he showed me the 9mm on his hip. Even still, he was in no way ready to walk up there and investigate the headstone. I decided to check it out and cross the pavement and onto the grass. Now this church is pretty well lit by half a dozen light poles, and the only shadows that were cast were by the headstones themselves. I start looking around on the third row, and I'm instantly hit with dread. About 15 feet in front of me is a pitch black figure sitting against one of the headstones. Its head was between its knees and was rocking steadily, back and forth, exactly as my buddy described. How he could have saw it from the car, I do not know. But even worse to think about was that I had been alone with this thing, unnoticed the entire time. I ask if he or she is all right, and get no response, only a faint whimpering, as if it was mourning the loss of whoever was buried at the grave. I figured grave visitations weren't unusual, but at midnight, that's fucking eerie. I walk closer to the figure until I am standing about 3 feet from it, and was going to speak out again until my blood runs absolutely cold. There is light illuminating onto the figure and somewhat of the surrounding ground, and unlike anything I have ever seen. The light seemed to just absorb into the blackness of the figure. I could see no defining features, couldn't make out shoes, hat, or hair, separation of clothing, which would have told me that this was a human being in my presence. The whimpering turned into louder, aggressive moans, and somehow, keeping my military composure, I backed away slowly, then ran down to my buddy and told him we needed to get the hell out of there immediately. And we did. About an hour later, we returned to the cemetery, but the figure was gone. We are no longer friends, but I still like to tell this story since it's my only real experience I've had of this kind. Still to this day, I have no idea what it was we saw that night. This is my twin story, not mine. I will mention both my brothers to differentiate I will call one my twin and the other my brother. We grew up in an old house that was built in 1900 in a town known for being haunted, which was kind of hokey. I think it is just a gimmick to pique the interest of tourists. I never really believed in all the ghosts and legends, but growing up, I did brag about living in a haunted house. Oddly enough, nothing too scary ever happened in my presence, but my family all have stories of their own that absolutely terrify me. I joke that the ghosts must have known that I didn't want to see them, so they left me alone and picked on those who were interested in seeing them. My family was nuts and tried to ghost hunt and thought the activity was neat. So, I had this cat named Todd. Todd turned out to be a girl, but hey, the name stuck. Whenever Todd was in heat, she'd always escape every time we opened the back door. She'd always come back and perch herself between the storm door and back door by her claws. She'd chill there and meow while perched in the window until you let her in. The way my house was structured, the back door opens onto the foyer on the main level, where the stairs to the second level are, and then a dining room and living room are sort of built around the stairs. So, you can walk a circle around the stairs by going from the foyer, through the dining room, through the living room, and be back at the foyer. I hope this makes sense. My twin is in the living room having some hushed conversation with a girl on the phone. The rest of us are upstairs in our respective bedrooms. My twin is sitting in a chair and you can see the top of the steps from where he is sitting. He says he thought he kept seeing a dark figure peeking out from behind the banister at the top of the stairs. It was so dark, he couldn't make anything out, and he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. He even mentioned it on the phone to his lover, but then thought he was just being silly. Not to mention several shadow people had been seen on the stairs by my mom. She had us all freaked out with stories of apparitions that she had claimed to see, so the stairs freaked us out anyway. He kept seeing this thing peek at him. It wasn't going away. It was crouched low and peering out from time to time. Then it rose and stood up. He said it started to slowly make its way down the stairs, but it wasn't walking, it was hovering. Then, perfect timing, the cat is at the door meowing to get in. In order to avoid walking straight past this thing, my twin went through the dining room to get to the foyer to let the cat in. He says he opened the door and Todd made a noise he had never heard come out of her. A real high-pitched meow scream. And then she ran straight for the stairs. To validate the whole ordeal, my younger brother was upstairs in his bedroom the entire time, not knowing anything had even happened. He was exiting his bedroom and he said he saw something headed down the stairs. He noped it straight to my parents' room and told my mother. Once the cat was let in, my twin turned on all the lights and didn't see the thing anymore. He went upstairs to my parents' room and told my mother what had happened, just as she was consoling our younger brother. I was blissfully unaware in my bedroom. My twin still gets visibly freaked out when I mention that thing on the stairs. This happened to me when I was on summer break in the middle of high school. I was hanging out with my best friend staying up all night, but his mom kicked us out of the house because I wasn't allowed to sleep over. So, this seemed like a normal night. We went to my house and messed around on my 360 until my dad kicked us out because he had to work and didn't want to get woken up. We walk around everywhere. The sun is fully set. We're messing around, talking about random stuff, shooting the shit, when he says, "Let's go walk over to City Hall." We were walking there when we noticed it was unusually empty and quiet. Now this is in the middle of Rhode Island and everyone's out and about up until 2 a.m. So we thought this was strange, but we ignored it. We took stupid pictures with his iPod Touch and my NV3. Then we decided to go towards his house, using the main road because we were sure it was the quickest and safest route. We walked past my street, and then we noticed there were still no cars on the road. It was only 12 a.m. at this point. I pointed it out to him, and he only dismissed it. Now, this main road to his house was maybe 1 mile, so it should have taken only 20 to 30 minutes to walk at our not-so-fast pace. Midway through this road, there is a gas station, and only 2 blocks from my street, I stopped us and told him, "Do you hear that?" The sound was light static like a radio and TV combined, but very muffled and quiet. We looked down the street, and at this gas station was a person. Now we just thought this was a homeless person, and from the way homeless people in downtown Providence act at these hours, we didn't want to go near him. So we crossed the street, but so did he. At this point, he was stumbling, mimicking us crossing the street without skipping a beat. My friend noticed this and he freaks out going,
"Look, do you see what he's doing? He's gotta be on drugs or drunk."
I started getting chills running down my back because I had realized he was mimicking me. It was like I was puppeteering his legs, but the rest of him was completely out of it, swaying, leaning backwards with his arms flopped out. I became petrified when he started walking by a light post, and I realized that I could not see anything of detail on him. No clothes, no face, just a black shape of a person. He was still walking towards us as I tried to shake his copy movements. I started running back and forth on the street, and at one point it looked like he was basically sliding across the street like a glitched video game character. Then he got within 2 blocks of us. My friend and I both instantly got an equally horrific feeling because we both looked at each other and said, "We need to run. There's something wrong here," more or less. And on the count of 3, we sprinted off the main road, down the block, only to stop at the 4-way intersection. We were under a street lamp and we just looked down the street to make sure he kept walking. All of a sudden, he stopped in the corner at the main road where we were asking each other, "What the hell is he doing?" when he burst into a full sprint towards us. We didn't skip a beat and turned into track runners, running towards my friend's house on the side roads. We got a block and a half away and looked back only to see this black figure walking away in the direction he was chasing us, disappearing out of view. It looked like the black outline of a zombie, in all honesty. We sprinted to the main road and kept walking, nervously talking about what just happened. Everything turned normal when a car passed by, but then went dead silent again. We noticed that not even the police were parked where they usually sit during these hours, but we kept walking. Now, before his street, there is a highway that separates the neighborhood, and to the right of that, before the bridge, is a small building for getting your alternative high school degree. We were walking past that, suddenly hearing what sounded like extreme static. Like the sound from Back to the Future when the DeLorean time travels, but only ear-piercing. The entire sky lit up blue, then faded to black. Time seemed to slow down for a few seconds, and then returned to normal with the sky. We realized that the sun was coming up, which was the most incredibly bizarre thing ever. It had just been 12:27 when I looked at my phone, and it was suddenly 6 a.m. We stood on the bridge, noticing everything returning to normal, talking about what happened. I refused to walk back home and crashed at his house until I walked to my house with his girlfriend at the time, because her and I were getting kicked out again for not telling his mom. The entire thing has me completely confused 9 years later, as it did the day it happened. I remember when I got home, I slept for nearly 26 hours, and I woke up with my mom asking me if I was feeling sick. Here's some additional information from the author. It had no eyes that we could see. Also, it was about 6 feet tall. It was leaning really far backwards, and it appeared to be looking up. It also had its hands flopped down, but the legs were like someone walking normally until it started sliding, when I was trying to see if it was copying me. Basically like the normal walk, but it was moving sideways, not matching the feet movement. I should also clarify, when it was sprinting at us, it was still leaned backwards, which is why it was so horrendously scary to see. Even when it passed under the streetlight when my friend and I were turning back to see if it was following, and it kept walking in the direction it sprinted at us, we couldn't see any other features.